Before its downfall, France was an economically thriving empire. With the use of their strong naval power, they colonized land all over the world. Conflicts with Great Britain were common because of the lands they fought to control. Through the combination of their own conflicts with Britain and aiding the United States in the Revolutionary War, France accumulated a large war debt. So much so that King Louis XVI was spending half of his national budget on repairing it. While the rich lived lavish lives owning much more than the working class of France, the lower class had to struggle hard to provide for themselves. In order to pay off this debt, the king imposed higher taxes upon the working class of France, while the Catholic Church collected 10% of all income. Unfair taxing was common in France at the time, as the king usually reserved all of the taxing to the lower class, leaving the nobles and the Catholic Church exempt from giving money to the government. Putting even more pressure on the lower class was the crop failures of the time, which led food in low supply, causing the price of it to rise. All of these hardships, along with the influential writings of the Enlightenment thinkers, led to a weak economy and a poor perception of the French government. In response to this crisis, the king held a meeting of the Estates General, something a French king hadn't done in over 100 years. The Estates General was broken up into three different groups: the clergy, the nobility, and the rest of France. The first estate represented the 100,000 Catholic clergy. Out of the 303 men, 2/3 of the estate were ordinary priests. The second estate represented the nobility. The nobility consisted of 400,000 men and women who owned about 25% of the land and collected taxes from the tenants. The third estate was represented by 610 men that stood for 95% of the population. The meeting was held on May 5th, 1789, at the Palace of Versailles that opened with a 3-hour-long speech by Necker. As the meeting went on, the Third Estate argued that the issues should be verified by all the deputies, rather than each estate verifying issues of their own members. When estates failed to achieve this, the Third Estate decided to break off and declared themselves the National Assembly. As an attempt to prevent the assembly from convening, the king closed down the palace where they met. In response, the assembly moved their meeting to an indoor tennis court, where they swore the tennis court oath. Under this oath, they agreed not to separate until France was given a constitution. A few representatives from both clergy and nobility soon joined the assembly. After the assembly's oath was made, King Louis sent 20,000 royal troops to Paris. His main goal was to quiet rioting from food shortages, but the revolutionaries thought the king was trying to suppress the assembly. In response, on July 14th, the National Assembly stormed the Bastille prison in hope for weapons and ammunition. After several hours of fighting, the assembly took control of the prison and 7 prisoners inside. After the fall of both the Bastille prison and feudalism, things only got worse. This was a time of much propaganda being spread to either aid or prevent the revolution. On July 17th, 1789, the peasants took action. Manor houses were raided and many crop fields were burned. These peasant revolts drove feudalism into a thing of the past. As it became unsafe for the members of the nobility, they left the country and plotted a counter-revolution. This lasted for weeks and it became known as the Great Fear. A day after the event, the National Constituent Assembly established the August Decrees, officially ending feudalism and eliminating all the privileges that the First and Second Estates once enjoyed. The Assembly continued to change the government by publishing the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which stated the natural rights of all people. On October 5th, 1789, 7,000 armed women marched to Versailles, asking for attention to the country's economic issues. They also wanted the king to move to Paris and commit to helping France. The Women's March on Versailles ended up having some positive impact because the king did indeed move to Paris the next day. During the Revolution, religion played a key part. The French Catholic Church was forced to help the revolution's cause. This would start the separation of the state and the church in France. At this point, the Assembly was in charge rather than the king, and so they finally wrote a new constitution in favor of constitutional monarchy on September 30th, 1791. To cap off the crisis stage of the revolution, the National Assembly went on a tangent of executing all suspected anti-revolutionaries, including King Louis XVI. The French Revolution undoubtedly had a major effect on the history of Europe. Lasting 10 years, the French Revolution resulted in the removal of the French monarchy and the establishment of a secular and democratic republic that became increasingly militaristic. From 1795 to 1799, there was a system in government in place called a directory system. This system soon grew unpopular with the French citizens, and Napoleon Bonaparte took advantage of the weak position of the Directory and committed a coup in 1799. With the establishment of Napoleon Bonaparte, the French Revolution ended. Napoleon eventually crowned himself emperor and made France into an empire. As France was becoming more militaristic, Napoleon rallied the French military into European conflicts now known as the Napoleonic conflicts. The Napoleonic Wars lasted from 1803 to 1815. Once the Napoleonic era was over, France returned to its original state by housing a king in office.